and you'll be a millionaire. It's on every personal finance blog. It's in every budgeting app. It's what your uncle tells you at Thanksgiving when you mention you're trying to save money. Just cut out the coffee, kid. That's where all your money's going. And you know what? You tried it. You stopped going to Starbucks. You bought a French press. You started making coffee at home. You saved, what, $4 a day? $20 a week? $80 a month? You did the math. $80 a month. Invested at 8% for 30 years. That's like, what, $120,000? Something like that. Not nothing, but also not exactly retire early money. But here's the thing that nobody talks about. You're still broke. You're still living paycheck to paycheck. You're still stressed about money. You're still not saving for retirement. You're still lying awake at night wondering how you're going to pay for that car repair or that medical bill. You cut the coffee. You did what they told you. And nothing changed. And now you're sitting there, feeling like a failure, thinking, I can't even save $80 a month. What's wrong with me? Here's the thing. Nothing is wrong with you. The advice is wrong. The latte factor is a lie. Not because the math is wrong. The math is actually correct. $80 a month invested for 30 years does grow to something meaningful. But the premise is wrong. The idea that your financial problems come from $5 coffees? That's not just misleading. It's harmful. Because it puts all the pressure on these tiny, meaningless cuts while ignoring the massive structural problems that are actually keeping you poor. And it makes you feel like a failure when those tiny cuts don't move the needle. Hi, what's up? And I spend way too much time thinking about the latte factor. Like, probably an unhealthy amount. I've read the book. I've done the math. I've watched thousands of people try to follow the advice and fail. And I've come to a conclusion that might make some people angry. If you're someone who's tried to budget your way to wealth by cutting out coffee and eating out, only to find that you're still broke and now also miserable, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Because what I'm about to tell you is going to challenge one of the most sacred cows in personal finance. And I know some of you are going to push back. But I promise you, by the end of this video, you're going to see your finances completely differently. Now, before we dive in, I want to make something clear. Most people think investing is about having a lot of money. The truth? It's about what you keep. I'm building a community at the Frugal Investor newsletter where we strip away the hype and focus on high-impact, low-cost wealth building. Get your copy of the 15-day blueprint for wealth and financial autonomy and join a group of like-minded investors who prioritize long-term gains over short-term trends. Link is in the description. All right, let's get into it. The origin of the latte factor. So where did this idea come from? The latte factor was popularized by a guy named David Bach. He wrote a book called The Automatic Millionaire. And the idea was simple. Small, daily expenses add up over time. If you cut out that $5 latte and invest the money instead, you'll become a millionaire. And look, the math checks out. $5 a day, $25 a week, $100 a month. Invested at 8% for 40 years? That's about $350,000. Not a million, but meaningful. Here's what most people don't realize. The problem isn't the math. The problem is what the math assumes. It assumes that you have $100 a month to invest. It assumes that cutting the latte frees up $100 that would otherwise be spent. It assumes that you're already covering all your basic expenses and this is just extra. But for most people, that's not the reality. For most people, the latte isn't the problem. The latte is a symptom. The latte is what's getting them through a life that's already stretched too thin. The math problem. Let's actually do the math. Because I want to show you why the latte factor fails for most people. Let's say you make $60,000 a year. That's about $3,800 a month after taxes, depending on where you live. Now, let's look at what an average person's expenses actually look like. Rent, $1,500. That's on the low end in a lot of cities. Food, $600. Car payment, $500. Car insurance, $150. Gas, $150. Utilities, $250. Phone, $80. Internet, $70. Student loans, $400. Health insurance, $250. Add that up, that's $4,400. You're already in the hole before you've bought a single latte. Before you've gone out to dinner. Before you've done anything fun. You're already spending more than you make. Now, tell me, where in that budget is the latte factor supposed to save you? You cut the latte, you save $80. Great, you're still in the hole. You're still stressed. You're still not saving for retirement. The problem isn't the latte. The problem is that your rent is too high for your income. The problem is that your car payment is eating up a huge chunk of your budget. The problem is that your student loans are crushing you. The problem is that the basic cost of survival in this economy has outstripped what a normal job pays. And telling someone to cut their latte is like telling someone who's drowning to stop swallowing water. It's not wrong, technically, but it's completely missing the point. The psychology problem here's where it gets really interesting. Because the latte factor doesn't just fail mathematically. It fails psychologically. And the psychology is actually the more important part. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, when you're constantly stressed about money, when you feel like you're working harder than ever and getting nowhere, that latte isn't just coffee. It's a coping mechanism. It's a small pleasure in a life that doesn't have many. It's the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning. It's the thing that makes you feel human. And when someone tells you to cut that out to save for retirement, it feels like they're asking you to sacrifice the only joy you have for a future that seems impossibly far away. Now, you might be thinking, but it's just coffee. It's not that deep. And you're right, it's not about the coffee. It's about what the coffee represents. The coffee represents the idea that you're asking people who are already struggling to struggle more. You're asking them to give up the small pleasures that make their lives bearable so they can maybe, someday, have a retirement that might not even happen. And when they can't do it, when they try and fail, they feel like failures. They feel like there's something wrong with them. Like they don't have enough willpower. Like they're just bad with money. That's not just wrong. It's cruel. The lifestyle problem. So if the latte factor is wrong, what's right? Here's the thing. The latte factor focuses on the wrong scale. It focuses on the small, daily expenses. The ones that bring people joy and don't actually move the needle. The real problem is the big stuff. The structural stuff. The stuff that's taking 50, 60, 70% of your income before you even get to decide how to spend the rest. Let me give you some numbers. The average American spends about 30% of their income on housing. 30%. For a lot of people, it's more like 40 or 50. That's not a latte. That's a mortgage. That's rent. That's the roof over your head. The average American spends about 18% of their income on transportation. Car payments, insurance, gas, maintenance. That's not a latte. That's how you get to work. The average American spends about 12% of their income on food. Not restaurants, just food, groceries, the stuff you need to survive. Add those three categories up. That's 60% of your income. Gone. Before you've done anything. Before you've bought a single latte. Before you've gone to a single movie. Before you've taken a single vacation. That's the problem. That's the thing that's keeping you broke. Not the coffee. Not the occasional dinner out. Not the Netflix subscription. The big stuff. The stuff that seems non-negotiable. The stuff that you've been told is just the cost of being an adult. Now, here's what most people don't realize. That 60%? It's not fixed. It's not the cost of being an adult. It's the cost of the lifestyle you've built. And that lifestyle? It's optional. You can change it. The real math. Let's do the math again. But this time, let's focus on the big stuff. Let's say you make $60,000 a year. $3,800 a month after taxes. Scenario 1. The latte factor. You cut your $80 a month in coffee. You're now saving $80 a month. In 30 years, at 8%, that's about $115,000. Not nothing, but not life-changing. Scenario 2. The lifestyle change. Instead of cutting coffee, you decide to cut your housing cost. You get a roommate, or you move to a cheaper neighborhood, or you rent out your spare room on Airbnb. You reduce your housing cost from $1,500 a month to $900. That's $600 a month. Now, you're not just saving $115,000 over 30 years. You're saving $860,000. $860,000. That's not a latte. That's a retirement. Scenario 3. The double lifestyle change. Now let's say you also cut your transportation cost. Instead of a $500 car payment, you buy a reliable used car for cash. Your car payment goes from $500 to $0. Your insurance drops from $150 to $100. You're saving another $550 a month. Now your total monthly savings are $1,150. Over 30 years at 8%? That's $1.6 million. $1.6 million. That's not just a retirement. That's early retirement. That's financial freedom. That's a completely different life. See the difference? The latte factor is trying to save you $80. The lifestyle shift is trying to save you thousands. And it's not about deprivation. It's about intentionality. It's about looking at the big expenses in your life and asking, is this actually how I want to spend my money? Is this actually moving me toward the life I want to live? The psychology of lifestyle change now. I know what some of you are thinking. Nick, I can't just move to a cheaper neighborhood. I have kids. I have schools. I have a job. I have a life. And I hear you. I really do. Changing the big stuff is hard. It's much harder than skipping a latte. It requires real sacrifice, real change, real disruption. But here's the thing. That's exactly why it works. The Latte Factor is easy. That's why everyone recommends it. It doesn't require you to change anything meaningful about your life. It doesn't require you to question your assumptions. It doesn't require you to do anything uncomfortable. But easy doesn't work. If it did, everyone would be rich. The fact that most people are broke despite following the Latte Factor is proof that it doesn't work. Real change requires real sacrifice. It requires looking at your life and saying, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to live differently. I'm going to make different choices. And yes, that's hard. But the payoff is enormous. Because when you change the big stuff, you're not just saving a few bucks a day. You're changing the trajectory of your entire life. Let me tell you about someone I know. Let's call him Marcus. Marcus was making good money. $80,000 a year. But he was broke. Always broke. Every month, he'd get his paycheck, pay his bills, and have nothing left. He was doing the Latte Factor thing. He wasn't buying coffee. He wasn't eating out. He was brown bagging his lunch. He was doing everything right. And he was still broke. One day, he sat down and looked at his expenses. Really looked. And he saw what the problem was. His rent was $2,400 a month. His car payment was $700. Between those two things, he was spending almost 40% of his gross income on housing and transportation. He decided to make a change. He moved to a cheaper apartment. $1,200 a month, half of what he was paying before. He sold his car and bought a used Honda for cash. No more car payment, no more full coverage insurance. His life changed. Not overnight, but over time. He went from having no savings to saving $1,500 a month. He started investing. He built an emergency fund. He started a Roth IRA. He started thinking about his future. 5 years later, he had $100,000 in investments. 10 years later, he had $300,000. He's on track to retire at 55. And here's the thing. He doesn't feel deprived. He doesn't feel like he's missing out. He lives in a nice apartment. He drives a reliable car. He has money to travel, to eat out, to enjoy his life. He just made different choices about the big stuff. The Latte Factor never would have gotten him there. The Latte Factor would have saved him $80 a month. That's nothing. The lifestyle shift saved him $1,500. That's everything. The three big levers. So what are the big levers? What are the things that actually move the needle? Let me give you the three biggest ones. Number 1. Housing. This is the biggest expense for most people. And it's the one with the most flexibility. You can live with roommates. You can live in a cheaper neighborhood. You can live in a smaller space. You can rent out part of your home. Every dollar you save on housing is a dollar that can go toward your future. And because housing is such a huge part of most people's budgets, even small percentage changes can add up to huge amounts over time. Number 2. Transportation. This is the second biggest expense for most people. And it's the one where people make the most emotional decisions. People spend insane amounts of money on cars. New cars, luxury cars, leased cars, financed cars. Cars that cost them hundreds of dollars a month for years. But transportation is just getting from point A to point B. A 5-year-old Honda does the same job as a new BMW. It just costs a lot less to buy, to insure, and to maintain. Number 3. Food. This is the third biggest expense. And it's the one that's most tied to lifestyle. People spend a lot of money on food. Restaurants, delivery, prepared meals, organic everything. But here's the thing. You don't have to eat ramen every night. You just have to be intentional. Cook more. Eat out less. Plan your meals. Buy generic. The savings add up fast. The lifestyle that makes you need coffee now. Let's get to the real insight. The one that's going to change how you think about all of this. The reason you need that latte? It's not because you're addicted to caffeine. It's because your lifestyle is exhausting. You're working a job you hate. You're commuting an hour each way. You're living in a place you can barely afford. You're constantly stressed about money. You're not sleeping. You're not exercising. You're not seeing your friends. You're not spending time on things that matter. Of course you need coffee. Coffee is the only thing getting you through the day. The Latte Factor tells you to cut the coffee. But that's backwards. The coffee is not the problem. The coffee is a symptom. The problem is the lifestyle that makes you need coffee to function. So instead of cutting the coffee, cut the lifestyle. If you hate your job, don't buy a latte to get through it. Find a job you don't need to medicate yourself to tolerate. If your commute is crushing you, don't buy coffee to stay awake on the drive. Move closer to work or find a job closer to home. If you're stressed about money, don't buy a latte to feel better for 5 minutes. Change the financial decisions that are causing the stress. This is where it gets really interesting. When you fix the big stuff, you don't need the small stuff. When you have a job you love, you don't need coffee to get through the day. When you have a short commute, you don't need caffeine to stay awake on the drive. When you have financial security, you don't need retail therapy or comfort food to feel better. The Latte Factor asks you to give up the coping mechanism without addressing the thing you're coping with. The lifestyle shift addresses the thing you're coping with. And when you do that, the coping mechanisms become optional. You don't have to give them up. You just don't need them anymore. The action plan alright, so you're convinced. The Latte Factor is a distraction. The real work is in changing the big stuff. But how do you actually do that? How do you shift from cutting coffee to changing your life? Here's the action plan. Step 1. Audit your big 3. Sit down and look at your housing, transportation, and food costs. Not your latte costs. Not your Netflix subscription. Your big costs. The ones that are taking half your income. For each one, ask yourself, is this aligned with my goals? Is this moving me toward the life I want? Or is this just what I'm used to? Step 2. Find your leverage point. Pick one of the big 3 to focus on. The one where you have the most flexibility. Maybe it's housing. Maybe it's transportation. Maybe it's food. Pick one and commit to making a significant change. Step 3. Make the change. Don't nibble around the edges. Don't cut your coffee and call it a day. Make a real change. Move to a cheaper place. Sell your car. Change your grocery shopping habits. This is going to be uncomfortable. It's going to require sacrifice. But it's the only way to actually move the needle. Step 4. Redirect the savings. The money you save from making these big changes needs to go somewhere. Not to more stuff. Not to lifestyle inflation. To your future. Set up automatic transfers. Invest the difference. Let compound interest do its work. Step 5. Evaluate your lifestyle. Finally, ask yourself the hard question. Why do you need the small pleasures? What are you coping with? What in your life is so exhausting that you need coffee, or shopping, or eating out to get through it? And then, instead of cutting the coping mechanism, address the thing you're coping with. The freedom lifestyle. I want to end with a different vision. Not the Latte Factor vision of a millionaire who skipped coffee for 40 years. A different vision. Imagine you live in a place you can afford. Not the biggest house, not the fanciest neighborhood. Just a place that's comfortable and doesn't stress you out financially. Imagine you drive a car that's paid off. Not the newest model, not the shiniest. Just a reliable car that gets you where you need to go. Imagine you have financial security. An emergency fund. Retirement savings. Money in the bank. Not millions, necessarily. Just enough to not be scared all the time. Imagine you have time. Time for the people you love. Time for the things you care about. Time to rest. Time to think. Time to be. Imagine you don't need coffee to get through the day. Not because you gave it up. Because you don't need it. Your life is sustainable. Your work is meaningful. Your stress is manageable. You're not coping. You're living. That's not the Latte Factor. That's the freedom lifestyle. And it doesn't come from cutting $5 coffees. It comes from making intentional choices about the big stuff. It comes from designing a life that doesn't require coping mechanisms. It comes from prioritizing what actually matters. I really hope this video brought you some value today. If it did, comment more down below. I'm reading through those to decide what topics to cover next, so definitely let me know if you want more of this. Look, here's the bottom line. The Latte Factor isn't wrong because the math is wrong. The math is fine. The Latte Factor is wrong because it's a distraction. It focuses on the small stuff while ignoring the big stuff. It asks you to sacrifice joy while leaving the structures that are actually keeping you poor untouched. The real work isn't cutting coffee. The real work is looking at your life and asking hard questions. Why is your rent so high? Why is your car payment so high? Why is your life so exhausting that you need coffee to get through it? Those are hard questions. They're uncomfortable questions. But they're the only questions that actually matter. Because here's the truth. You can cut your latte for 40 years and still be broke. Or you can change your life and be free. The choice is yours. But don't let anyone tell you that skipping coffee is the path to wealth. It's not. It's a path to feeling like a failure when you inevitably can't do it. The path to wealth is bigger than that. It's about designing a life you can actually afford. A life you don't need to escape. A life that doesn't require coping mechanisms. A life that's already enough. That's the freedom lifestyle. And it's waiting for you. You just have to stop worrying about the latte and start looking at the big stuff. Alright, I'll see you in the next one.